I'd like to share some thoughts now on the prayer life of Jesus, and specifically that which we find in John 17. Now, this was filmed in Bethsaida in Galilee, in the region of the Holy Land, where we were filming a brand new 6-part documentary series looking at the life of Jesus. You'll hear much more about that in the coming months as it becomes available. But I hope my first thoughts from this about the prayer of Jesus will give you some insight of that work. Jesus taught on many themes. One of the most significant themes, especially in Luke's Gospel, was his emphasis on prayer. In the Sermon on the Mount, he said that we should pray privately. He talked about persistence in prayer, keeping on and demanding through that lovely image of the widow in need of help. But perhaps the greatest insight in prayer doesn't come from the Synoptic Gospels, but from John's Gospel, where we have this marvellous intimate moment of Jesus at prayer. We've seen him in Gethsemane praying, but perhaps here, before we enter the Passion, just before we enter the Passion, we get to understand how he sees prayer himself. John 17 has been described by many scholars as the high priestly prayer of Jesus, where he is praying for various groups of people. But first of all, before he prays for others, he prays for himself. So the first section of John 17 shows us praying for himself, looking toward heaven, there is an action about it, and praying that God would glorify his Son, that he might glorify you, the Father. Something quite deep about that and profound. Understanding, if you like, that the blessing that is on him is a blessing he wants to return to the Father. And glorification is one of those great themes in John's Gospel. So firstly, he prays for himself. Then he prays for his disciples. He recognizes, and I don't think I've heard much said about this very often when people have reflected on John 17, he sees the disciples as a gift of God to him, the Son. And he thanks God for them. And there is displayed in the disciples, he suggests, an obedience as he prays. He prays that he knows all things come from God, and he prays for a quite specific prayer for the disciples. But there is a third group, and that third group is for all who will believe. Now, I suppose we can include ourselves in that prayer. All who believe through the witness of the disciples and those first apostles. Those who believe through their direct message for the world. And it seems to me that there's something rather wonderfully spiritually inclusive in this prayer that we cannot miss. And what is the content of the prayer quite directly? He prays that all may be one. So it's a prayer for unity. And this passage has been used many, many times by people who've been praying for people to come together and to be united. And what he says is this: just as he, Jesus, and the Father are one. Very often people struggle to understand the Trinity and how we can understand the uniqueness of Jesus as God's Son and Jesus the Father. Here in this prayer, we have something of that answer given as an explanation in direct relationship. Just as Jesus and the Father is one, so his prayer is that all will be one. And the reason why he longs for oneness is that the world might believe. The greatest witness that we can make is by being together as one. I'm very conscious when I come to the Galilee and I travel around that I'm meeting Christians from every kind of nation and persuasion in the world. And the prayer is that we might be one, because that will be our greatest witness. The prayer has an enormously long scope. And if Jesus prays that at that moment in time, it comes at a significant time because it precedes his arrest in John's Gospel. So before we enter into the Passion and all the suffering that comes as what follows his arrest, it comes as a significant moment. He will cross the Kidron Valley and into the city of Jerusalem to face everything that lies before him. But before he does that, he will pray for himself, his disciples, for the world, no, for us. Now, please keep an eye out for that series about Jesus in the Galilee. We filmed it over 20 days, working in the heat of the desert sun and along the shore of Lake Galilee early this year. Of course, we'll keep you updated. We'll let you know more about it, more about the series, and when it becomes more available for you to be able to share in it.